What? Really? Trading away Michael Jordan? Yup. While looking back, in hindsight, it would be simply ridiculous for the Bulls to ever consider trading him. But it wasn't as clear back in the day, and many analysts believed his style of play could not lead them to a championship. Of course, they were all wrong, but back then, his game was debatable. It wasn't cut and dry. Most of these trade proposals happened on draft night. Nobody was sure if he'd have the capability to lead a team as well as Magic or Bird, or if he'll go the route of the typical super athlete without the leadership and charisma to succeed. Anyway, in this video, let's take a look at 6 different times when MJ almost got traded. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and without further ado, let's get started. Michael Jordan for Terry Cummings. Before Jordan got drafted in 1984, nobody knew how good he was going to be. Yeah, he was amazing in college, but a lot of hyper-athletic college players end up failing in the NBA. So the Bulls, holding the 3rd pick of the draft, decided to shop around a little bit. They called a few teams here and there just to gauge the market value of the pick. That's where the Clippers came in, with Terry Cummings. Now, for those who don't know him, Cummings ultimately turned out to be a perennial 20 points per game scorer, as well as a 2-time All-Star. He was drafted in 1982, and in his first 2 years he was fantastic, but it was speculated he had some heart problems. They wanted the 3rd pick. They wanted to flip Cummings in a deal to land a franchise player, which they believed they could get with the 3rd pick, whether it's Hakeem or Sam Bowie or Michael Jordan. They preferred the 2 big men, but they liked Jordan too. For the Bulls, they actually thought about taking this deal and trading the 3rd pick for Cummings, mainly because they also preferred either Hakeem or Bowie, but they knew they could not get them. Ultimately, and thankfully, the Bulls backtracked and changed their mind and settled on drafting Jordan. Good choice. Michael Jordan for the number 1 and number 6 picks of the 1988 draft. 4 seasons into MJ's career, and his team had mixed feelings on him. On one hand, Jordan catapulted into superstardom, making All-Star games, All-NBA teams, winning scoring titles, and just flat out dominating. But that didn't stop the Bulls from considering a deal. According to the book The Jordan Rules by Sam Smith, he stated that the Bulls were once again considering dealing him to the Clippers, this time in exchange for picks in the '88 draft. The reasoning for this was, apparently the Bulls management, especially Jerry Krause, really did not like Jordan. He thought he was an arrogant, selfish ball hog and had trouble getting along with his teammates. He believed he was a cancer in the locker room and couldn't see him ever developing the leadership skills to win. Likewise, Jordan also despised Krause and his decision-making. Throughout his career, we've seen him criticize Krause many times, even during his Hall of Fame speech. This animosity reached an all-time high in 1988, where MJ was absolutely furious that Krause traded away Charles Oakley, a tough-nosed bruiser and MJ's close friend. All of this tension, all of this buildup led to the 1988 offseason, where the Bulls got so close to pulling the trigger. But they did not. I can't imagine where MJ's career would have gone with the Clippers, but it couldn't be good. Oh, and those 2 picks in the proposed trade turned out to be Danny Manning and Hershey Hawkins. Great players, but obviously not on Jordan's level. Michael Jordan for Tree Rollins. As I mentioned earlier, the Bulls' priority in the '84 draft was not taking a guard. They desperately needed a center. So desperate, in fact, that they were willing to deal him on draft night to the Hawks for Tree Rollins, a 7'1" center who, in 1984, averaged fewer than 9 points and 8 rebounds a game. That's how desperate the Bulls were. Although he was a defensive powerhouse, a blocking machine that caught the interest of the Bulls. On the other end of this ridiculous trade proposal, imagine if it did go through. We would see the Hawks equipped with both Dominique Wilkins and Michael Jordan. Can you imagine how entertaining they would be? I mean, they'd probably be fighting for the ball and butting heads over who should be the primary scorer, but that would be exciting as hell. Two of the greatest athletes in NBA history on the same team. Maybe they could have won a few championships. The Hawks in the 80s were only one piece away from being true contenders, so Jordan would be that piece and more. Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler for Ralph Sampson. Now, this trade is a bit different because it involves multiple teams and neither of them were the Bulls. In the summer of '84, the Portland Trail Blazers held the number 2 pick of the draft, which we know was eventually used to draft Sam Bowie. They also had Clyde Drexler, a young shooting guard who, at that time, came off the bench as a rookie and didn't get many minutes. So they reached out to the Rockets, offering them a trade of Drexler and the number 2 pick for Ralph Sampson, a 7'4" beast of a center who was the real deal. The Rockets considered this offer. According to Hakeem Olajuwon's book, they really did spend a long time mulling over this offer from the Blazers. If this trade went through, the Rockets would be in possession of both the number 1 and number 2 picks of the '84 draft, plus Clyde Drexler too. They planned to use the picks to draft Hakeem and Jordan, giving them this ridiculously talented trio. Certainly the most talented big three in NBA history. However, what ultimately happened was that the Rockets valued Ralph Sampson way too much. It was reasonable at the time though. He was putting up great numbers, making all-star teams in his first couple years, and the idea of having a twin tower front court of him plus Hakeem, it was too enticing to pass up. Unfortunately, as most of us know, Sampson quickly deteriorated due to injuries. Knee and foot problems plagued him by the late 1980s, and it all went downhill from there. Michael Jordan for Dr. J. The Sixers were a major player during draft night. They were scrambling, they were making calls, reaching out to many teams trying to strike a deal. One of those deals included a very interesting offer. Sixers owner Harold Katz and, well, the entire Sixers team loved Dr. J. But by 1984, even though they won the championship 1 year prior, you could tell he was slowing down. He was approaching his mid-30s and his decline was inevitable. Katz was quite observant of Jordan's college years at North Carolina and thought of him as a young Dr. J. He believed in Jordan, he truly did. He believed he would be the guy who will take over the legacy of Dr. J, and their playstyles were strikingly similar. That's when he offered Dr. J to the Bulls for the 3rd pick, and it was so close to happening. According to Katz, he stated, "I thought I had a deal with Jonathan Kovler, the owner of the Bulls, for the 3rd pick. Rod Thorne, the Bulls GM, killed that one and took Michael Jordan." Thankfully, Thorne saved Kovler from getting finessed. The logic from Kovler was that the Bulls were struggling with attendance numbers and needed that extra boost to their revenue. Dr. J was one of the most popular players in the league, so fans would be buying tickets and rushing to the games to see him. He would have definitely helped them financially, but from a pure basketball standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to trade a 21-year-old MJ for an aging Dr. J. The Sixers almost got away with it too. They could have paired MJ with Charles Barkley. And speaking of Charles Barkley, this brings us to the last trade of the video. Michael Jordan for Charles Barkley, Andrew Toney, and Clement Johnson. This is the only trade involving MJ that could have worked out for both teams. Here's the context. The Sixers held the 5th pick of the draft. They also had a solid young shooting guard in Andrew Toney, an all-star and 20-point-per-game scorer, plus a decent backup center in Clement Johnson. This was actually a very solid proposal. I mean, the Bulls would get an absolute stud in Barkley, plus an all-star shooting guard and a solid center that they needed anyway. Just like the previous offer, Harold Katz wanted Jordan at all costs. This was another proposed offer he sent to the Bulls, and he figured that, hey, if they won't accept Dr. J for him, maybe he could be a nice mentor for Jordan. He knew MJ looked up to him and it would be great for his development. Not only that, but a young MJ could immediately be a starter and replace Andrew Toney's spot, while Barkley would have to play behind Moses Malone from the bench. The organization thought long and hard about this trade, more seriously than others, but ultimately turned it down. If it did go through and MJ joined the Sixers in their heyday, man, that would be freaking crazy. They might have won a few more titles in the 80s. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 6 proposed trades involving Michael Jordan that almost happened. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on which one do you think was the most interesting? Which team had the best offer for MJ? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.